Let's track the legislative history of the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act. Mitch, what game are you playing? Upon passage of the Hloga in the Senate in January 2007, Mitch had this to say: "This is a classic example of bipartisanship here in the Senate at its very best." However, almost exactly a year ago, when the same bill was presented to the Senate, Mitch had nothing to say about it. Radio silence. In fact, the bill died a quiet death in committee under his party's watch. How did Hloga go from partisan non-starter to bipartisan success over the course of just 1 year? Let's find out. This story starts with the second session of the 109th Congress. Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid introduced Hloga, a bill that strengthens public disclosure requirements concerning lobbying activity and funding, among other things. The bill is referred to the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee. In the House, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi proposes the same bill. It gets referred to the Judiciary Committee. You know that song, "Killing Me Softly" by the Fugees? Well, the Hloga knows it all too well. The bill died in both committees. What do I mean by it died? Well, it didn't receive any hearings, markup, and was not reported by either committee. No reason was given, no news story was filed, no committee member has stepped forward to explain the bill's demise. But we can apply Kriebel's pivotal politics model to shed some light on this enigma. Here we have the ideological spectrum built with the assumption that President Bush, the incumbent president at the time, inhabits the right side of the ideological spectrum. According to DW Nominate Scores, Senator DeMint is the most conservative member of the Senate, and Senator Harkin from Iowa is the most liberal. Our filibuster pivot is Landreau from Louisiana, and our veto pivot is Senator McCain of Arizona. You'll notice the point Q. By averaging the DW Nominate scores for the co-sponsors of the bill, we determined roughly where the bill lies on the ideological spectrum. And you can see it lies outside the gridlocked zone, as defined as the area between the veto pivot and the filibuster pivot. And this aligns with our basic understanding of congressional politics in the 109th Congress. Consider that Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, the leaders of the Democrats in their respective chambers, were the ones who introduced the bill. The Hloga was a legislative priority for the Democrats. It was one of their rallying cries during the 2006 election. Certainly, the Republicans did not want to give way to the Democrats' top legislative priority. It would make it seem like they were compromising with the opposite party, and that could affect the Republican primary and maybe even general election results. It's also very plausible that the Democrats did not want the Hloga to pass in the 109th Congress because they wanted to preserve the issue for the 2006 election to galvanize their liberal base. But times are changing, and in 2006, the Democrats took the majority in both the House and the Senate. Harry Reid moves immediately. He introduces the Hloga as the first piece of legislation in the first session of the 110th Congress in January of 2007. SB 1, as it's called, is sent to the Senate Homeland and Government Affairs Committee, where it's reported on the first day. However, Senator Harry Reid faced immediate opposition on the Senate floor. Senator Reid had to agree to hold a vote on an amendment regarding line item precision. Senator Reid had to agree to accept an amendment from Senator Tom Coburn that would prohibit members of Congress from advocating for earmarks that resulted in personal gain. After 2 weeks of negotiations and multiple compromises, Senator Reid finally hammers out a bill that's acceptable to Republicans, and the Senate passes the bill 96-2. Representative John Conyers in the House introduced a similar bill on May 15, 2007 in the first session of the 110th Congress. This is also entitled the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act. On the same day, Representative Van Hollen of Maryland introduced a similar bill entitled the Lobbying Transparency Act, which specifically regulates bundled campaign contributions. Both bills are assigned to the Judiciary Committee, where they underwent significant changes during markup. The most notable changes were the addition of restrictions on lobbying rules for law firms and the removal of stringent revolving door provisions. After 2 days of markup, the Judiciary Committee approved both bills by voice vote on May 17th. But when they took the bill to the floor, Democrats had to make even more compromises to attract the votes of rank-and-file members. Democratic leaders had to scale back many of the controversial sections of the legislation, including provisions requiring public notification of lawmakers' private sector jobs and exemptions for nonprofits to payments for lobbying groups. After passage of a different version of the bill in the House, the leadership from both chambers attempts to form a conference committee. But Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina repeatedly blocks efforts to appoint Senate conferees to the conference committee because of his objection to lobbying disclosure rules in the bill. Therefore, the leadership from both chambers are forced to reconcile the differences between the two bills informally. A final bill is hammered out and submitted to both chambers. The House approves the final bill first on a 411 to 18 vote, and it's sent to the Senate. Reid is able to secure an 80 to 17 vote to limit debate, and the Senate passes the final bill on an 83 to 14 vote. Is pivotal politics 2 for 2? Does Kriebel's model predict that the bill passes in the 110th Congress? Well, first, we need to reconfigure the ideological spectrum to take into account the 2006 midterms, and we find, after averaging DW nominate scores of co-sponsors of this new bill, that in fact the bill is situated in the gridlock zone, in between McCaskill, who's the filibuster pivot, and Cochrane, who's the veto pivot. So indeed, Kriebel's model does predict that the bill passes in the 110th Congress, whereas it didn't pass in the 109th Congress. And on September 14, 2007, President Bush signed the Honest Leadership and Open Government Act of 2007 into law. And there you have it, the story of how Hlogo went from political dead meat to political success.